It's time for the Alien Conspiracy Podcast. We are your hosts, Agent ETA,
Agent Ether,
and Agent Anderson. Come along as we examine UFO sightings, conspiracies, and all things strange. You can follow the show on Twitter at AlienConPod. We also have an email address, alienconpod@protonmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And don't forget to check out our Facebook page and or group, AlienConPod. Before we get started with this week's episode, Project MKUltra, it's time for Strange Events, Bizarre Facts, the Unbelievable Revealed. This is the Mind Boggle of the Week.
All right then, folks. So, unbelievable, or is it? Does the moon spin? Social media wants to know why we always see the same face in the sky. Does the moon spin? Some of the answers people gave were no. The moon does not have gravity. The moon does not have a dark side. The moon was brought here by aliens, and the moon rotates like a clock. Now, none of these is correct, except I'll withhold judgment about the aliens. That may or may not be true. So
no, it's totally true.
I think it's true too. So if you look down on the moon and the Earth from above, you would see the moon moving about its own axis exactly as long as it takes to orbit around our planet. Its revolution matches its rotation. It's always turning to show us the same face, and it's turning at the same rate the Earth is turning. And this is called tidal locking, and it's the same way for most large moons in our solar system. So why is that? There's a gravitational interaction between the moon and the Earth, and just as the moon is pulling on the Earth to make the tides, the Earth is pulling on the moon. Now, the moon passing by the Earth, it has such a strong force that the ground rises up to a foot as it passes by, and because the Earth is so much bigger than the moon, this effect on the moon is even more powerful, and it creates this force which makes the moon a football shape. Now, once upon a time, the moon spun around very rapidly, and the bulges changed constantly, not entirely unlike water tides on Earth. And the bulges were always out of alignment with the pull of gravity, and they acted almost as handles that the Earth could grab a hold of. And over time,
that reminds me of puberty, what you just said right there.
All about bulges.
There's always changing and stuff and moving direction, and yeah, it's uncomfortable.
So when the moon was in its puberty, it had bulges, and the Earth grabbed a hold of the bulges, and over time it slowed down the moon. And that's why the moon rotates the way that it does.
Nice. So the moon actually rotates.
It does. It actually rotates. And I'll go ahead and post a nice YouTube video because sometimes a visualization is better than an explanation.
It boggles the mind. And now it's time for the show.
It's MKUltra. Hey, no motherfucking nefarious. Yeah.
Yeah, let's get to Project MKUltra. All right, I'll go over just a quick overview here. So MKUltra, it actually started with Project Bluebird in 1950, and it was renamed Project Artichoke in 1951. Artichoke was changed to MKUltra in 1953. Then this was changed to MK Search in 1964. MKUltra had as many as 149 sub-projects, maybe more. 4 MKUltra sub-projects were designed to experiment on children. Oh yeah, I just want to preface this episode. I just want to give a fair warning to people. This shit gets pretty fucking dark in this episode at some point. So
really dark. Some of the stuff that is supposed to have happened under these experiments, it makes you just question, like, how evil can people really get? Like, if you're the person, like, we'll get into all, how dark and horrific some of these experiments are or were. But holy mother of God, man! Like some of the stuff that they did to people, prolonged experiments.
I think what Agent Anderson is trying to say is, don't listen in front of your children.
Yeah, don't listen in front of your children. Don't listen in front of anybody, man. This is
not safe for work.
Yeah, not safe for anybody. This is some pretty dark stuff. But yeah, so Like I was saying, there's 4 MKUltra sub-projects were designed to experiment on children specifically, and one of those was aimed at creating a split personality in children, which I'll let you use your imagination to what methods were designed for that. But the goals and research of MKUltra included many things like mind control, hypnosis, behavior modification, interrogation techniques, biological warfare, and creating split personalities in test subjects.
I'm pretty sure that's what the MK stands for. Mind control. What do you think?
No, it actually stands for the division of the CIA that it was under. The MK was the designation for that particular branch of the CIA. I forget which one it was. And Ultra, during World War II, Ultra was the highest level of classification. So that's where the name comes from. I didn't actually take notes on that, so I forget the specifics. But it's something along those lines. They did lots of illegal stuff, such as using civilians in the USA and around the world as unwitting test subjects for experimentation. So on the split personalities field, they were trying to create Manchurian candidates. You might ask yourself, why would they want to give somebody a split personality? Well, the idea was to create a sub-personality that the subject would be totally unaware of. And then at some time, you could give that person a trigger word or a secret word that would cause them to do something that they didn't know that they were programmed to do. And that's why they were interested in split personalities. If you're not familiar with the Manchurian Candidate, that's basically a story about exactly that, about somebody who was programmed to commit assassinations and they didn't even know that they had been programmed.
Nor will they either remember afterwards.
Yeah,
supposedly.
exactly.
That was one of the other goals, yeah.
Yeah, that was the whole idea too, is yeah. In these experiments, they use many different types of drugs. Anything you can think of, they tested at some point or other, but LSD was probably the one they used the most. They also used things like hypnosis, shock therapy, total isolation, drugs, physical, verbal, and sexual torture, and many, many other fun and lovely ways of experimenting on subjects. The research was undertaken at more than 80 institutions, including prisons, hospitals, universities, and pharmaceutical companies. Mental patients and other patients were experimented on without knowledge or permission at places like Yale, Harvard, Stanford, UCLA, and other universities. In total, I think there was something like 44 universities involved. Supposedly, all of this originated from ideas generated from the Japanese and Nazi experiments from World War II era. And that's a whole other separate topic, which I don't think I ever want to do an episode on, because that is also some pretty dark shit. And it's hard to even read about this stuff. So I don't want to talk about that. I'm going to stick my fingers in my ears, say la la la, and pretend it didn't happen. All right. Many people involved with these experiments, like the scientists and doctors and whatever, were supposedly grabbed from Operation Paperclip, which just kind of blows my mind, because you have all these Nazis committing war crimes, essentially experimenting on these Jewish and other prisoners in World War II. And we're taught in our history classes, they give us lessons in history about just how evil and horrible this stuff was. Well, guess what? We nabbed these exact same people, and instead of putting them in jail or stopping them, we just said, okay, guys, why don't you just go ahead and keep doing what it was you were doing?
Well, not only that, but we're going to give you even more money to do it now too.
Right.
And one of the crazy things I find about Operation Paperclip is that, so that they had parameters set on like who they could supposedly grab and use later on, and also a lot of it had to do with what they had, the type of crimes that they had potentially committed. So a lot of these records, that would support, that had evidence of some heinous crimes and stuff related to some of these individuals, were just plain destroyed to, allow them to be brought over to the United States and to use for whatever, benefit.
Yeah.
I find that kind of crazy and a little bit disturbing too, because there's a lot of stuff that these people did that there's no way to know now. I mean, like, we don't know that there's all sorts of stuff they probably did that we don't know, that we're never going to find out, because all those records were destroyed,
Yeah. We'll probably do an episode on Project Paperclip at some point. It's too crazy to not do an episode on, but when that is, I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
I don't know much about it, but it sounds really interesting.
It's crazy. It's just about as crazy as this one.
You could do like a couple episodes just on Vernon von Braun. You know?
Oh yeah, for sure.
What he did for the Nazis, and then afterwards, you know, what he did for the United States and NASA. Like there's quite a bit going on there.
So the short version is that Werner von Braun was brought over from Operation Paperclip. In Germany, he did wonderful things, such as using prisoners, like Jewish prisoners, as workers. And in his factories, I forget the exact number, but something like 20 people died every day because the working conditions were horrible. So he wasn't directly putting bullets in heads, but that's just a very short version of, you know, he was not a good guy at all. Like, he knew what was going on, you know?
One of the stories that you hear about some of his factories and stuff, and one in particular, was that they would have a race at the beginning every day, and the slowest person would get executed, basically.
Right, yeah.
You know? And that was like before they even started working in the factory, from what I understand.
And he came over to the United States, and he got pretty much a free pass, and they put him in charge of our rocketry program. And he was a big deal. You know, pretty much he's the guy who did our space program and stuff. Like, all of our rockets and all that stuff was, you know, a Nazi did a lot of that stuff. I don't know the specifics of what was designed by whom, but Werner von Braun he designed a lot of our technology for going to space.
Yeah, well, you can definitely say the guy was evil, but I mean, he definitely developed some interesting stuff. I mean, famously, he was, you know, credited with developing the V2 rocket, right? Yeah, the buzz bomb that terrorized Britain, you know. And so the guy definitely had some high levels, you know, technical ability, but man, was he responsible for some heinous stuff.
Yeah, and I can understand the idea that, well, if we don't get these guys, Russia will get them and they'll get a leg up on us. But on the other hand, at that point, it's not like Werner von Braun was the only person on the planet who was able to make rockets. We had scientists here that were perfectly capable of developing that stuff. So it just seems, I don't know, whatever. But we won't go too far down that road, because that's a whole episode.
Yeah, well, isn't that the whole idea behind MKUltra 2, was that we had to develop these techniques because it was during the Cold War and we were worried.
I know that one of the stories that I heard leading up to, you know, like researching this and stuff, is that like after the Korean War, they had some POWs come back that seemed very sympathetic towards like the communists and stuff, and they thought that our government thought that could be, you know, those people may have been like brainwashed in some way. So that's like one of the periods in time in which that they ramped up their research into this field. Because they assumed and they thought that you know, Russia, China, or some of these other countries might be involved in this type of stuff. So they figured that, hey, if they're involved in it, we better damn be well too, you know. So, and then, you know, I think it's kind of like a little bit of a vicious cycle too, because say the Russians found out that, oh, the Americans have a you know, this program, this type of a program, you know, a brainwashing program or what have you. Even if they weren't already involved in it, well, they're going to be now, right? So they're going to have the same type of response. Where, you know, if they weren't involved in it before, they better be now, because then they're just going to fall behind and they become vulnerable in some way, you know?
Well, yeah, it's kind of a mental war too, not just you know, that's why they call it the Cold War, but I think it applies more than to just, you know, building up arsenals. It's an intelligence.
Buddy, shut up.
And there's the mascot of the show right there, buddy.
That's our mascot. I'll post a picture of him on Twitter, maybe. He's our resident cryptid who likes to bark during recordings. Buddy.
Hey, he's just giving his opinion. He feels strongly about this case.
Yeah, you know, well, who doesn't, man? Who doesn't, you know?
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Okay, there he goes.
Nothing wrong at all.
As I was saying...
It sounds like Buddy's becoming vicious.
Oh, he's a killer. He's a real killer.
I know. He's a dangerous animal.
He's outside out.
He's been quiet pretty much all day. Now, as soon as we hit the record button, that little butt. All right. So anyways, where was I? So the Project Paperclip was first brought to public attention in 1975 by the Church Committee, which I believe Agent Ether has a lot of notes on, so I won't say anything about that. In 1973, the CIA director, Richard Helms, ordered the destruction of all MKUltra records. And so we have some documents that were from MKUltra, and that's how we kind of know about it. But the vast majority of documents were destroyed. The only documents we have they were kind of sent to the wrong building by mistake. Whoops, those are supposed to be destroyed.
It's only by chance that we even know about MKUltra, really.
Yeah.
Because they put a great amount of effort into destroying whatever they could. And that group of documents that were found, it was like, yeah, it was a total mistake. Like they were supposed to be destroyed. They just slipped through the cracks.
Yeah. And in addition to that, it was their policy not to keep a lot of records and notes about the experiments that they were doing. So a lot of the evidence was destroyed, but who knows how much is out there that was never even documented.
Yeah. Well, and also like one thing that I keep on asking too is like how successful were they really? You know what I mean? Because, supposedly they weren't all that successful. But I mean, if you were, would you advertise it?
I have an example of someone who I will wait to talk about until Agent Anderson is done with his overview.
Yeah, wait till I get done with the overview. But I have some quotes from documents. I poured over a few documents, and I got to say, man, I was looking at stuff. I spent hours and hours, and I only barely scratched the surface. And the documents we have is only a small fraction of what was possible out there. Like so much has been destroyed. But well, we'll get to that later, but yeah, there's some pretty alarming quotes I have that, that are from actual documents that are, we'll get to that later. Here's a quote I found from Wikipedia that I like that pretty much sums up some of their goals. So I'll read that because I thought this encapsulated the project pretty well. It says, the CIA sought to establish control over what it perceived as the weaker and less intelligent segments of society, or for potential agents, defectors, refugees, POWs, and others. A CIA report states that if hypnosis succeeded, assassins could be created to assassinate a prominent, redacted politician or, if necessary, an American official. The overseas operations took place in locations throughout Europe, Japan, Southeast Asia, and the Philippines. Teams were assembled to manage these operations, and they were told to conduct at the overseas bases operational experiments utilizing aliens as subjects. And there's more countries involved than that. Like, for example, Canada. They did a lot of MKUltra stuff in Canada, but that's just a handful of the countries. But all right, so that's pretty much just like a brief overview of what the project was and some of the particulars. But now I guess we'll just talk about various things in no particular order, because there's so much just shenanigans and asshattery involved. It's kind of hard to organize it all. So I don't know. Who wants to go first with any particular topic?
I want to talk about Operation Midnight Climax.
Okay.
Oh, I like the name of that.
Have you heard of it? I thought you'd be excited.
Well, I am a little excitable.
So there was this play that was written by Niels Bell, and it was called Operation Midnight Climax. And basically there's 3 CIA operatives monitoring a prostitute through a one-way looking glass while she's, doing stuff with a drug dealer. And so this whole project is based on this play. And the idea is for the CIA to create these safe houses, which they did in San Francisco, Marin County, and New York. They installed cameras in outlets. They had one-way looking glass. They had these brothels, and they put prostitutes on their payroll, and they would spike the drinks of these men who came in with LSD. And one agent described it as a freewheeling party-like atmosphere.
I could imagine.
These projects, like I said, there was at least, there's 149 sub-projects is what I found, but possibly more. These were all highly compartmentalized and very sparsely supervised. So some of these projects, like for example, Midnight Climax, had almost no oversight at all.
And that's true. And the people who were monitoring these gentlemen who had had their drinks spiked, they weren't doctors, they weren't professionals. They were just agents. And George White, who was an agent who was there in 1971, wrote, "Of course, I was a very minor missionary, actually a heretic, but I toiled wholeheartedly in the vineyard because it was fun, fun, fun. Where else could a red-blooded American boy lie, kill and cheat, steal, deceive, rape, and pillage with the sanction and blessing of the All-Highest?" Isn't that a beautiful quote?
That is crazy.
Just imagine if you're a CIA agent and the agency says, all right, here's I don't know, $2 million. Go spend it on LSD and hookers, and don't send back any reports because we don't want a paper trail, Yeah.
And by the way, we don't want to know what happened unless it's, it relates to these specific parameters,
Right. They were feeding them subliminal messages and recording their reactions. So that was apparently the whole point of the experiment. But you have to wonder in this environment what they were really doing, if anything. It sounds like a lot of BS to me.
Yeah, the sky's the limit, you know what I mean, with that kind of level of control and free will, you know what I mean? Who knows what the hell happened. The thing that I wanted to talk about, to be quite honest, is some of the methods in which they would gather subjects or test subjects, there was, I find it kind of nefarious, underhanded, because there's so many different groups of people that they drew from to test. Let's just start with military personnel. So one of the stories, because they would have different things available, to earn extra money or leave time or what have you. And so they would have these different clinics and stuff, and they would advertise hey, we're doing research for to cure the common cold or to combat the flu or something like that. And so there was this one, well, not one, but there was a couple different cases where they had a sign up saying that we're trying to combat the common cold. And it turns out, no, that's not at all what they were doing. This was part of MKUltra. But of course, being in the military, you've pretty much signed your life away and you're now, owned by the government. So there's quite a bit they can do to you with quite, a small amount of options that you have afterwards to, protect yourself or, cry or complain about what had happened. You know what I mean? They had what was supposed to be research into a cure for the common cold, but what they were really doing was injecting people with LSD. One of the other experiments, I guess they were experimenting with sarin gas as well. Well, sarin, not just sarin gas, but they would inject sarin into people and I guess test the effects. The LSD is the one that was most widely used supposedly. And just imagine you're in the military. Let's just say you're in the Army. And you're like, all right, well, I'll participate in some of these studies here to earn a little extra money or what have you, or whatever it is, you end up getting injected with LSD, and go on quite the trip, I would imagine, especially I would imagine, because most of these people, especially at that period in time, it's not like LSD was super available for the public, what I mean?
Nobody knew what it was back then, especially in the 50s. You would have no context for what you were experiencing.
So they were basically lab rats.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They had no idea what the hell was happening, Just imagine, the twist within your reality. You know what I mean? How would you even deal with that? All of a sudden, nowadays, even if you've never done LSD, I think I have kind of an idea of what it would be like just because of all the different descriptions. I mean, hey, you ever watched Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas?
Well, who hasn't?
I haven't.
I mean, yeah, that gives you, I think that gives you probably a pretty good idea of what it potentially could be like, but way worse because you don't even know what you're dealing with, I
have an example of a specific military personnel. He was a U.S. Army Sergeant, Mr. James Stanley. Have you guys heard of him?
Yeah.
And he was actually awarded $400K in 96 for his participation in MKUltra. Now, he was highly decorated. He lied about his age. He enlisted when he was 15. And then at about 1958, he was a volunteer to test clothing and gas masks for chemical warfare. But instead, him, along with 741 other soldiers, were given LSD, and we're talking about 3 to 10 times the amount of a street dose. And it ruined his marriage, and it ruined his life. He would wake up choking his wife. He would lecture to an empty room for hours, and he had tons of missing time. He would go out for gas and come back 2 days later, and have no memory of where he had been. And he continued to have these breaks in sanity. And then in 75, he's having a hard time. He doesn't know why. 17 years later, he receives a letter, no explanation or apology. It says, according to our records, you were a participant in the chemical warfare test with LSD. And that was it. And he still, to this day, he has not been issued an apology. And he went to court and he said, I don't want the money. This isn't about the money. This is about an apology for what happened to me. The Army was arguing that he couldn't even sue them because any harms were inflicted incident to service. And so I guess you're barred from suing when you're in the military. And it went to the Supreme Court in 1987, and they voted against him 5-4, arguing it was a military matter and they shouldn't intrude. And there were 2 justices who dissented, and they argued that preservation of military discipline shouldn't protect the government from liability and punishment for serious violation of constitutional rights. And Justice Sandra Day O'Connor wrote that the U.S. played a role in the criminal prosecution of Nazi officials who experimented with human subjects, and standards were developed to judge the behavior of defendants to satisfy moral, ethical, and legal concepts. So if that principle is violated, the very least society can do is see that victims are compensated as best they can be by their perpetrators. But it took decades for him to get compensated.
And this is a trend that has been happening in the United States and in Canada also for victims of MKUltra. There's been quite an effort to, basically devise tactics and methods to compensate the ones you really have to, but also at the same time, create like a silence around the situation. They definitely don't want people talking about this. That's for sure. Anybody involved or that has gone through any kind of these studies, whatever you want to call it, they definitely don't want them talking. That's for sure. Even though a lot of them are,
They experimented on so many people that if they admitted any kind of liability whatsoever, it would bankrupt the U.S. government.
And they had volunteers, but they also had people that didn't know they were being injected with or drinking or whatever, the LSD.
Who knows how many more countless people, because like we had talked about before, the vast majority of all these records were destroyed. Mm-hmm. So we'll never really know the vastness of this project. You know what I mean? I'm sure that anything that they have publicly admitted, relating to this has been downplayed, as much as they possibly could. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And also there's an idea, we don't know if this is true or not, but they've released further documents through the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. And there's an idea out there that most of the documents released they only released stuff that didn't work all that well. That way it made the whole project look kind of goofy and like a waste of time, kind of like Men Who Stare at Goats kind of a deal. But a lot of people think that the stuff that actually worked or the real good research and stuff, they're never going to release that. Because, obviously, why would they, right? But they'll release the stuff that didn't work. We've been talking about LSD a lot, in the last couple minutes. But I think what ETA was referring to earlier is LSD was only one very small part of this thing. They did a lot of different shenanigans. Like, for example, one of the things they experimented with was brain electrode implants. So they put brain electrodes in animals and people, and they were able to remote control them with like a little box with buttons and stuff. And they were able to not only control their movements to the documents I saw didn't describe how fine the motor control was, but you'd imagine it wasn't that great. They were stomping around like Frankenstein or something. But they were also able to put electrodes in the brain that were able to alter the people's personality, memory, and behavior. And they were also able to control the emotions of the subjects with the push of a button. So this is just one example of the many, many things that they were up to. This project went on for decades, right? And the earliest one I was able to find was something the Navy was kind of experimenting with in 1947 to 1953. that might have been like a precursor. Basically, from 1950 to 1973 or 74, I forget which. And that's a lot of years, and we only know a very small amount of what they actually got up to.
Yeah, man. Like, especially that artichoke era. You know what I mean? I'm sorry. I just find that code name so absolutely hilarious. Like,
yeah.
it's Project Artichoke, huh? Like, well, the imagination goes wild.
Yeah.
Well, what is that? All right, I stop. I desist. We need to move on.
Yes, let's move on. I found a good quote from the project about LSD specifically. They were talking about, well, I'll just read the quote. Some of the more outstanding effects are the mental confusion, helplessness, and extreme anxiety which are produced by minute doses of this substance. Based upon these reactions, its potential use in offensive psychological warfare and in interrogation is considerable. It may become one of the most important psychochemical agents. And when we're saying LSD, we're talking about the doses. I think Agent Ether mentioned 3 to 10 times what you might take as a street dose. And that they were doing this to certain people for like months on end. So it wasn't like just a one-time thing.
Yeah.
No, they would dose them weekly or monthly.
Just imagine.
Yeah.
Just imagine what a hellish existence that could possibly be.
Right.
I mean, especially if you're having a bad trip, right?
Imagine people, like, let's say somebody who has schizophrenia who goes to a mental hospital for help, and then they get this stuff done to them, and they think they're losing their mind. They don't know what's going on, and they're given massive doses of LSD every day for like 6 months, and then when they come out, they're an absolute vegetable. There are stories like this. There are lots of stories like this.
And how could you not be? You know what I mean? I mean, geez, you'd have to have an absolute concrete mind and a level of resistance in order to withstand that kind of bullshit. That's the kind of prolonged, like, torture is what I would refer to it. Because I mean, how could it not be, right?
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff that really like pisses me off about this case, man. Because God, that must have been such a horrible existence. I mean, you can't even begin to imagine, you know?
Yeah, but at the same time, you had people who were volunteering for the program. You have Robert Hunter from the Grateful Dead. I think he was a lyricist.
Oh, yeah.
Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. And James Joseph Whitney Bulger, who is a mobster.
Yeah, Whitey Bulger. Ha!
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of people that supposedly, it's not necessarily as verifiable, but like Charles Manson supposedly was a part of that program as well.
That's right.
And also, gosh darn, I'm brain farting hard now. Lead singer of the Doors, Jim Morrison.
There's a lot of people. I was not able to like verify this, but there are some people who claim that the entire hippie movement was actually started by Project MKUltra because they were dosing so many people with LSD, and they were dosing these people at the universities where a lot of these kind of movements, where the hippie type stuff started. This.
Well, one of the other rumors that I heard is what was that feller's name? The first, like the guy that was the head of the whole project MKUltra for the CIA.
Gottlieb.
Yeah, Gottlieb.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So one of the rumors that I had heard is when they started this project, they literally bought the world's supply of LSD, like pretty much as like every all the LSD they could find, they bought it.
Well, how did it get onto the street then? So this is making me think right now, if LSD wasn't on the street before, and then Project MKUltra came along, were they somehow involved in getting it to the public?
Well, that's a whole other topic. The CIA and drugs. I don't know if we want to go down that road. It'd be here all night.
My opinion would be abso-freaking-lutely yes.
Yeah. Well, there was so little oversight that you have to assume, at the very least, that some of these CIA agents were taking some of this stuff and selling it on the side or something. I mean, there's no oversight at all. They could do whatever they wanted, right?
Well, I think it might not even be that simple. I think they might have purposely, that's part of the experiment. You know
that's what I was thinking.
Let's see what this shit does in the public. You know what I mean?
We've done these controlled,
start using it as a party drug or something.
Right, we've done these controlled experiments. Let's get it out there in a more chaotic environment and see what the result is.
Let's see what this does in the wild, right?
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah.
possible. I don't know. Just
Speculation.
a total speculation.
Yeah,
But,
well, it's interesting to theorize about this stuff, and that's a theory that actually makes a heck of a lot of sense in the context of what they were doing, actually. So I like that one.
Because it gives them more data, more perspective.
All right. I'll talk a little bit about a fella named Dr. Ewen Cameron, E-W-E-N. You guys read about this guy at all?
No.
I heard his name.
Oh boy, this one's a real barrel full of monkeys, let me tell you. So this guy was a really successful and powerful psychiatrist. He was the president of the American, Canadian, and World Psychiatric Associations at one time or other, and he actually
wasn't he one of the founding members?
Yeah, he was actually co-founded the World Psychiatric Association. Exactly. He began experimenting on patients as early as the 1930s at the Brandon Mental Hospital. For example, one thing he might do to his patients was he would take people who were suffering from schizophrenia and make them lie naked in red light for 8 hours a day for as long as 8 months, some of them. Because reasons? I don't know why you would do that. You'd have to look up the research.
Yeah.
This guy sounds like one sick motherfucker. Like, what idea could you possibly have? Okay, here's somebody with schizophrenia. Let's just make them lie down on the floor in red light naked for 8 months. Like, it doesn't make any sense. He was just like torturing them, right? I don't know. But he would also do things like he would induce comas in patients and then bring them out of the comas like over and over again, like a couple times a day for months and months on end. I guess just to see what would happen. I don't know. He's actually published some of these bizarre and sick experiments in peer-reviewed articles, which, shame on the world of psychiatry, right, for allowing this to go on. But one example of that would be
in his day, he was very, very well respected too. He was like at the top of the food chain, kind of.
Yeah.
Right?
So one example of something that he got published in a peer-reviewed journal is an article called Psychic Driving. He describes a technique in 2 stages. First, patients are de-patterned or reduced to a vegetative state using some combination of massive electroconvulsive shock, sensory deprivation, and drugs.
Brutal.
In this state, they're fully de-patterned, which means that they're completely wiped clean. So they were incontinent, they were unable to feed themselves, they could not state their names, location, or the date. They couldn't remember even basic vocabulary like what is a car. They you completely erase the person's mind. And this is some dark shit, man. Like the second stage, called Psychic Driving, he would use hundreds of hours of tape loops, and he would play that to the patients through like earphones or speakers in a sensory deprivation room. And that was used to like program them, I guess. And he received government grants to produce this research. And this was like in the 1960s. And I just want to reiterate, this was not theoretical. He did this to people.
Right. There's peer-reviewed journals.
Some of the people were able to successfully sue the government later on. But like I was reading a story about this lady who had no memory before like 1963. Like after he was done with her, like she didn't know that she was married. She didn't even know what a husband was. Like she was completely erased. Like it's almost as if she was a newborn baby. It's bananas. And that's just one of, there's a lot of doctors that were working for this program, but that's just one of the many, many dark examples of what were being done to people. So that's what I mean when I say like, it wasn't just LSD. They were doing all kinds of sick shit to people. But so that's a quick blurb on him.
Just imagine like that first step, right? The reprogramming, right? Like the resetting of the person itself or whatever, their being, their self being. Just imagine what that takes. The amount of like pain and suffering that must have been inflicted, Yeah. I mean, I couldn't even start to imagine, but it's got to be extremely substantial, I mean, to gain that kind of outcome,
Yeah, and he calls it de-patterning, like it's so clinical sounding.
De-patterning.
What do you have to do to somebody's mind to completely erase it, to erase everything, even the ability to go to the bathroom on the toilet or something? Like it's just, it's incredible. Like just what some of these people did, like you were saying, just pure evil.
Like I had touched on earlier, I mean, how evil do you have to be in order to, be willing to inflict this type of pain on other people? over and over and over again. I mean, like you had talked about earlier, like just the LSD, like people had, gone through months of day-to-day prolonged exposure to high levels of doses of LSD.
Without
Holy
being told,
mother
in many cases, without even being told what was being done to them.
And some people got not only that, but also electroshock. And some people got just, one or the other, but
or both.
Some people got both as well, and a lot of people did, supposedly. But I mean, just imagine the hell that would have to be present, man, like to do that. I mean, it's holy crap, dude. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it, but like that's a high level of evil right there. You know what I mean?
It's chilling. Like is how fucked up this is like, I didn't even know this sort of thing was possible before reading about this. Like I would never, if somebody told me that you could actually do this to a person, I'd be like, well, you could torture somebody and you could like mess them up in the head, but I would never have guessed you could completely erase somebody's mind by just fucking with them so badly. It's crazy, man. It's like one of those things. I don't even like thinking about it. So let's move on to another topic. I think Agent Ether wants to talk about Frank Olson. That's another.
That's not a happy topic either.
Another cheerful event in Project MKUltra. Hooray!
Yay! Okay, so a little background. You have Mr. Frank Olson. He's an expert in aerobiology who was assigned to the Special Operations Division of the U.S. Army Biology Center in Maryland. And he was well respected by his colleagues. And he had Colonel Ruitt, who was his superior at his time of death, was almost in daily contact with him. And he said, this guy Olson, he's professional. His abilities are outstanding. Prior to an experiment which was done on him, he said, I noticed nothing which would lead me to believe that he was of an unsound mind. So what was this experiment? On November 18th, 1953, a group of 10 scientists from the CIA and Camp Detrick attended this semi-annual review and analysis conference at a cabin located up in Deep Creek Lake, Maryland. And 3 of the participants were from the CIA's technical services staff, and the Detrick representatives were all from the Special Operations Division. So they agreed that an unwitting experiment would be done on some of the people who were at this conference. So imagine you're a professional and you're just going to your semi-annual conference to meet with other professionals and exchange ideas, and they perform an experiment on you. So what they did was they spiked his drink. They put LSD in his drink. According to Gottlieb, who we've mentioned before, it was a very small dose that was put into a bottle of Cointreau. That's how you say it, right? Cointreau.
I think so.
And it was served at dinner, and it was placed in the liquor by Robert Lashbrook. And all but 2 of the participants received the LSD because one didn't drink, I think, alcohol at all, and the other had a heart condition. So isn't that nice? They didn't dose the people who had a heart condition and weren't drinkers. So
that's very considerate.
So about 20 minutes after they finished the bottle, Gottlieb informed the participants they'd received LSD. And then, apparently they were boisterous.
He actually told them.
He did. And they were boisterous and laughing, and they couldn't continue the meeting. What? Yeah, they're just...
For reals, though?
They're just tripping. They have this... So they're just hanging out till about 1 a.m. and chirping, just totally tripping. And a lot of them had trouble sleeping, and they had wakefulness, some general symptoms. And then they all went to bed. And the next morning, Olson appeared kind of agitated, but nobody thought this was abnormal because, well, he'd just been experimented on. But unfortunately, he continued to exhibit some symptoms. The following Monday, he was waiting for Ruitt, who was his supervisor, when he came into work, but he had trouble working.
Buddy, shut it.
Buddy's getting pissed.
Yeah. He's getting heated, man.
He wants to go outside and bark. Buddy, stop it. So over the next couple days, Olson's friends and family kept telling him to snap out of what appeared to be a very serious depression. So he goes to his boss, Ruitt, and after a really long conversation, they decide that he should go ahead and seek medical assistance. So Ruitt called Lashbrook, who's the one who dosed him, and let him know he was in trouble. And so the three of them left for New York to meet with Dr. Abramson. Now, this doctor, he wasn't a psychiatrist. He wasn't a psychologist. He was an allergist and immunologist. He practiced medicine in New York City.
So he's like Dr. Phil.
He was the Dr. Phil of the time. So, you know, he I don't know if he just talked to him. They didn't describe any kind of treatment. I mean, what kind of treatment are you going to get for the side effects of taking LSD? So it was the three of them. They're in New York for a couple days. They consult with this guy. Then they fly back to Washington so he can spend Thanksgiving with his family. But on the way there, Olson just said he couldn't face his family. He just couldn't do it. He was too agitated. He wasn't in a good state, and he just didn't want to be there with them, you know, in that state. So they decided they would return to New York. So they returned the same night, and they stayed in a Long Island hotel, and they decided that he should be placed under regular psychiatric care at an institution close to his home. Now, unfortunately, they couldn't get any air transportation that same day back to his hometown. So they went ahead and stayed in the hotel. They watched television. They went to the bar. They hung out. And then they went to bed. At approximately 2:30 a.m. on Saturday, Lashbrook was awakened by a loud crash of glass. He stated Olson had crashed through the closed window blind and then the closed window and fallen to his death from the window on the 10th floor. And they called it a suicide. Maybe it was. On finding that Olson had leapt to his death, Lashbrook telephoned Gottlieb in his home and informed him about the incident. And Lashbrook told the police he didn't know why Olson had committed suicide, but he did tell them that Olson suffered from ulcers. So, you know, maybe that's why, the ulcers. They didn't mention the LSD experiment for some reason. So following the death, the CIA naturally made a substantial effort to ensure that his family did not find out about this. They gave him all the death benefits that he received for being a member of the organization he worked with, but they did not notify them of the circumstances surrounding his demise, and they supplied complete cover for Lashbrook so that his association with the CIA would remain a secret. So after the death of Olson, the CIA did conduct an internal investigation, but, you know, nothing really came of it. The family did ask for a second autopsy, and the coroner said that some of the injuries appeared to have happened before the fall, and eventually the family was awarded $750,000 and got an apology from then President Ford. But really, we'll never know what happened if his apparent suicide was a direct result of the LSD. He certainly wasn't someone who was depressed before or mentally unstable. And of course, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, and of course, there are questions. There are conspiracies surrounding his death and whether or not it was a suicide or if he was, in fact, murdered. But I didn't find much information on that other than speculation.
Well, it wasn't. It was his son that had his body exhumed after burial, right? And then they had an independent autopsy. but again. That's all, folks. Sorry. Anyways, they had an independent autopsy done, which supposedly found that there was blunt force trauma before the fall.
Before the fall, yeah.
And then they had a private settlement with the government or something, right?
Yeah.
Maybe he was friends with the Clintons.
Hey, man, if he was, he wouldn't still be around, I don't think.
It's an interesting one because LSD works on your serotonin receptors, And that can affect your mood. So if you're treated for depression, they'll give you medicine like Prozac that works on your serotonin system. And I'm not 100% sure on all of the chemistry and whatnot, but it is apparently possible after coming down from LSD, it is possible to get symptoms of depression and whatnot. On the other hand, symptoms of depression don't usually cause physical damage in and of itself, like the coroner found. So I'm wondering if this guy was kind of freaking out somehow, and he was threatening to tell people about it. Like maybe he just really needed help from a doctor even. And he said, I need to tell a doctor about this so I can get help. And of course, the CIA being the CIA says, not a chance, buddy. And they throw him out a window. Anything's possible, but I don't know. It's a strange case for sure.
It's a easy solution, fast solution.
That's for damn sure.
And I just want to say everything that I stated, that wasn't speculation. That came from the Senate hearings of 1977. And there's all this documentation that supports these statements and the background and the experiment and the treatment and the subsequent consequences of what was done to Mr. Frank Olson.
Yeah. And that is the crazy thing about this case. This case, it's not like this is a case where like at the end we're going to give our opinion like, oh, do you think this actually happened or not? No, it definitely happened because there's a substantial amount of documentation and evidence to support this actually happened. It's just we don't know the extent of it really.
We're being pretty clear when we're speculating, and so when we're not saying we're speculating, that means that what we're saying, we feel that there's evidence for.
Yeah.
So I'll read some stuff from documents just to prove that point.
Right, actual documents.
Whenever we do these episodes, I don't always read from documents because it could be pretty dry. Usually I'll just read the source information and then form my opinions, and I might quote it here and there a little bit. But in this case, we have some pretty crazy shit from the documents, so I'll read some of those little excerpts. So here's from a CIA document from February 10th, 1954. Miss Redacted was then instructed, having expressed a fear of firearms, that she would use every method at her disposal to awaken Miss Redacted, now in a deep hypnotic sleep, and failing this, she would pick up a pistol and fire it at Miss Redacted. She was instructed that she would not hesitate to kill Miss Redacted, carried out these suggestions, including firing the unloaded gun at Redacted. After proper suggestions were made, both were awakened. Miss Redacted expressed absolute denial that the foregoing sequence had happened. So this is from a document describing an experiment where they got two hypnotized subjects. They got one of them to pick up a gun and shoot the other one in the head because they couldn't awaken them or something. And it says the gun was unloaded. But this is an example of one of the things that they tried to do was to get people to do stuff that they wouldn't normally do and to not remember it. So that's just one. I'll go through. I don't want to do them all in a row because we'll spread it out a little bit maybe so it doesn't get too dry. But that's just one of many, many interesting excerpts from documents that I found. Agent Ether, do you want to talk a little bit about these Senate hearings that you mentioned?
Right. So as a result of these Senate hearings, I just want to mention that Ford issued an executive order that prohibited experimental drugs in humans without consent. So I think that kind of summarizes the extent to which these experiments affected politics at the time, to where he had to issue this executive order. Now, during these Senate hearings in 1977, they were looking, I think, for clarity about what had actually happened. These documents had been found. There were thousands of pages. They'd been found accidentally through the Freedom of Information Act. Someone had hunted down 7 boxes that were accidentally filed with the Retired Records Center in Washington. One of the major players as far as testimony goes is one Admiral Stansfield Turner, who was appointed by Carter to head the CIA in 1977. So he did tell Senator Kennedy that no experimental drugs were being used by the CIA currently. There were no current experiments. So this was in 1977. So he claimed that by then the project had in fact been terminated. And here's some interesting facts And they're just based on the transcript that I read. It's available online through the Freedom of Information Act. Anyone can read it. It's a couple hundred pages long. But it has a lot of the documents that Agent Anderson mentioned at the end that are relevant to the hearing itself that people were questioned about. So they did admit that they played a part in the death of Frank Olson that was decided. They did talk about how the monitoring agents were not doctors or professionals. And also, they talked a bit about how in psychiatric institutions and jails, they would use heroin as a reward for participation. So they would look for volunteers, drug addicts, to participate in their experiments. And if they did, they would reward them with heroin. I don't know if you guys read anything about that.
Yeah, oh yeah. And I also read that they would take drug addicts, like let's say, or they would induce drug addiction using heroin or morphine or something. So they get people addicted to drugs, and then they would force them to withdrawal as part of the experiments.
Oh, joy.
If we do that, maybe we can get them to fess up or give us the information we want or something. Who knows what they were doing, but that was definitely part of the experiments.
Yeah, and this admiral, he claimed that the White House had no involvement. He said there was no evidence of White House involvement, and I'm not sure whether I believe that or not. It's hard to believe that all these experiments could take place and that it wouldn't be known by the higher branches of government, especially since that's where they get their money from. It's not like this money comes from nowhere. And I read somewhere that they dedicated 6% of the CIA's total budget to Project MKUltra.
Yeah, but on the other hand, they did use a lot of operation fronts to launder, not really launder, but to hide where the money was going.
Yeah.
Like one of them was a hospital. I think you were talking to me a little bit earlier about this, Ether, but they used a hospital to funnel money into these programs secretly so that it wouldn't really be on the books. And if you look through the documents, you'll see them quite often talking about organizing these front operations.
Yeah, that's correct. There was a $375,000 amount that was funneled through the Geschicker Fund for Medical Research because this private donation triggered matching federal funds. So they made it look like it was coming from a private institution. And that actually, they created the medical institution. It came out later at Georgetown. And it was investigated for defense against drug and chemical techniques used in interrogation and brainwashing. And during the hearing, Senator Schweiker says, at two different points, there were indications that the CIA decision makers thought it would be a great benefit to keep whatever happened within this brick and mortar walls of the facility. So what's the second indication? The Atomic Energy Commission was supposed to pay and pick up part of that tab. And when that fell through, the CIA picked it up. So they were really interested in having this hospital wing. And there isn't a lot of documentation about what they were using the wing for. And Admiral Turner refused to name, confirm, or deny any individuals or any institutions. And he cited the Privacy Act. And he talked about how he just didn't want the public to get involved. So it was all a PR thing where he did not want these institutions' names to come to light because he said they might have been unwilling participants. They might not even know who they were. And so he really strongly suggested that these institutions not be named. And then I want to talk just a little bit about Subproject 54 that was funded by the CIA.
But wait, before you do that, let me read another short snippet from a document just to kind of mix it up a little bit. So this juicy little tidbit is from document 140393. The instruction began with redacted, relating to the student some of his sexual experiences. Redacted stated that he had constantly used hypnotism as a means of inducing young girls to engage in sexual intercourse with him. A performer in redacted orchestra was forced to engage in sexual intercourse while under the influence of hypnotism. Redacted stated that he first put her into a hypnotic trance and then suggested to her that he was her husband and that she desired sexual intercourse with him. All right, that's it. That's just a little A lot of these documents are much, much longer than what you're hearing, but I'm just giving you just the juiciest little bits there. So that's a fun
I've
one.
I've always been kind of skeptical when it comes to like hypnotism and stuff like that. Like, is it real? I don't see how it could possibly work. I don't know.
I think there's different people have different levels of susceptibility, and I'm right along there with you. I'm also very skeptical, but these documents, these are like reports of things that they did. These are like mission reports. These are not like, theoretical reports of what could or could not happen. These are people reporting what they did in their experiments. And it's possible that they made this all up, but it's also possible that they developed some very effective techniques of hypnosis. And we talked about it earlier, I believe, but they didn't just use hypnosis. They also combined it with other things like drugs and other types of techniques.
And when they say hypnosis, like, I don't think they mean like the hypnosis you see in the movies and on television. They probably mean a much more substantial kind of hypnosis.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they got the special sauce that nobody else got. It's like your regular stage hypnotist is not doing the same thing that these guys were doing.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
And they I don't think I talked about it anywhere yet, but they were also using various things like directed energy and magnetic waves to fuck with people's heads, and they were able to use magnetic waves or magnetic fields to change people's perceptions and to even cause them to have amnesia and stuff. So this document didn't specifically say that they were using that, but they might have been using something along those lines with also like drugs and other things to, induce this hypnosis.
I was thinking drugs. Yeah. Induced hypnosis through drugs.
This was a very, very sophisticated program that went on for decades. So they didn't do this for over 20 years and not figure out anything. It wasn't all just bumping around in the dark. They figured out how to get some stuff done, or they wouldn't have kept doing it, I'm guessing.
Well, nor would the program have been funded for that long. Just 20 years alone. Right. If it wasn't producing any kind of positive results, then it wouldn't have been funded for 2 decades to begin with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That would be far too long for the amount of money that had to have been spent in this program, So, I mean, and also supposedly, there's evidence that the program was just renamed and prolonged. It was just continued. So, and it might still be going on to this very day.
That's right. Do any of us really believe just because they said that they aren't doing these things anymore that that's actually what's going on? I mean, I feel just the opposite, that maybe it's become more sophisticated over time and more secretive.
Sure. If there's a benefit,
If this was the stuff they were doing in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, that's honestly terrifying. Because they're not going to just keep doing the same thing. They're going to advance their research. They're going to get better at it and more sophisticated. So and there's certain cases that I think about when reading about this. Like, for example, the assassination of, Robert Kennedy, where, like Sirhan or whatever, like I don't know. That's a whole other thing. But there's certain cases where I think about what if this was one of those things. I don't know. But maybe not get into that right now because that'll take us way far afield.
Yeah.
But anyways, what were you gonna lead into there, Agent Ether?
I was talking about Subproject 54, which was funded by the CIA and operated through the Office of Naval Research. Now, the interesting thing is we have Admiral Turner who's testifying at the Senate hearings, and a lot of times he claims that experiments didn't happen, and then the committee would pull up documentation and point to it and say, but it says right here, this actually did happen. And it's really hard to argue when you have the documentation in front of you. So for Subproject 54...
You know what his defense was for that?
His memory was a little fuzzy.
No, he said, nuh-uh.
I plead the fifth.
Nice. Perfect.
Wait, there are only so many amendments to the Constitution. How does it go? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So this was in 1955, and the whole point of the project was to cause concussions using sound waves. So Turner says the project never started, and then the Senate points out that there's evidence of the experiments. The documentations talk about a blast range, a 2,500 square foot lab, creating amnesia and the perfect concussion in a series of 3 blasts using a blackjack device giving high peak impact force. Yes, lovely.
That old blackjack?
I tried to look up what that meant. I'm assuming it's just the device that produces the sound waves.
All right, I'll get in. Are you done with that blurb, Agent Ether? Okay, I'll get into another document here. This is a CIA document, a special research document about Project Bluebird. And even though it was for Project Bluebird, that was the predecessor to MKUltra, it's still basically the same thing that they were doing in MKUltra. They just changed the name for whatever reason. This is an excerpt. This is like an 8-page document, 2 of which the 2 entire pages are redacted, and there's lots of redactions throughout. But actually, a surprising amount of it is readable too. So, here they're talking about different goals of the. I'm going to say A, B, C, D. These are like different questions they're asking if we can research this or if we can accomplish this or whatever. And they say, A, can accurate information be obtained from willing or unwilling individuals? B, can agency personnel or persons of interest to this agency be conditioned to prevent any outside power from obtaining information from them by any known means? C, can we obtain control of the future activities, physical and mental, of any given individual, willing or unwilling, by application of SI and H techniques? So SI in this case stands for sleep induction. You'll see this throughout many, many documents. This is the most common thing you're going to see throughout these documents is SI and H. SI is sleep induction and H is hypnosis. So that's what they mean by willing or unwilling by application of SI and H techniques. D, can we prevent any outside power from gaining control of future activities, physical and mental, of agency personnel by any known means? Bluebird believes that A above can be answered in the affirmative using SI and H techniques. Bluebird is not fully satisfied with results to date, but believes with continued work and study, remarkable and profitable results can be obtained regularly. However, B, C, and D are as yet unanswerable, although Bluebird is of the opinion that there is a worthwhile chance that all 3 may at some future date be answered affirmatively. This opinion is supported by generally by numerous individuals having knowledge of these techniques and by much literature and intelligence in this field. Since any affirmative proof of B, C, A, and D would be of incredible value to this agency, Bluebird's general problem is to set up, conduct, and carry out research, practical, not theoretical, and on the document, not theoretical is underlined, in this direction. So just pay attention to what they're saying there. Since this stuff would be really good to do, they're going to conduct and carry out research, practical, not theoretical. In other words, they're not going to write papers. They're going to actually get out there and do it, which is what we've been talking about this whole time. But my point is this is a document that actually proves their intent in that direction. Bluebird's specific problems. 1. Can we condition by post-H suggestion agency employees or persons of interest to this agency to prevent them from giving information to any unauthorized source or for committing any act on behalf of a foreign or domestic enemy? 2. Can we, in a matter of an hour, 2 hours, 1 day, etc., induce an H condition in an unwilling subject to such an extent that he will perform an act for our benefit long range? 3. Can we create, by post-H control, an action contrary to an individual's basic moral principles? 4. Could we seize a subject and in the space of an hour or 2 by post-H control, have him crash an airplane, wreck a train, etc., short immediate activity? Now, I just want to read that one again in case it kind of went by too fast. This is what they were trying to do. 4. Could we seize a subject and in the space of an hour or 2 by post-H control, have him crash an airplane, wreck a train, etc.? This stuff is bananas, people.
So they want to take someone off the street, perform hypnosis, and then get them to be a terrorist.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
5.
That's a pretty damn short period of time too. Like
right.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
That's why like I don't normally read the documents, but when you start combing through these documents, like every document is like a mind boggle, and you can find thousands and thousands of pages online. It's a lot of really insane stuff in here. But okay, so 5, can we, by SI techniques, force a subject, unwilling or otherwise, to travel long distances, commit specified acts, and return to us or bring documents or materials? Can a person acting under post-H control successfully travel long distances? 6, can we use SI and H to combat fatigue, produce extreme mental effort? 7, can we guarantee total amnesia under any and all conditions? 8, can we alter a person's personality? How long will it hold? And then I skipped a couple here that I thought were redundant. 12, can we devise a system for making unwilling subjects into willing agents and then transfer that control to untrained agency agents in the field by use of codes or identifying signs or credentials? Skipping 13. 14, what would be fastest way to induce SI and H conditions, with drugs or without any mechanical aids? With drugs or without any mechanical aids. Which mechanical aids? They don't say. We don't know, but we know for a fact they were working on them. Skipping 15, going to 16. 16, is it possible to find a gas that can be used to gain SI control from a gas pencil, odorless, colorless, one-shot, etc.? Skipping 17, going on to 18. How can sodium A or P, which I think is sodium pentothal or whatever, which is like the truth serum, or any other sleep-inducing agent be best concealed in a normal or commonplace item such as candy, cigarettes, liquor, wines, coffee, tea, beer, gum, water, aspirin tablets, common medicine, Coke, or toothpaste? 19. How effective can the carotid artery technique be made? Can it be used while subject is unconscious? Is it faster than other techniques? Now, this document doesn't say what the carotid artery technique is, but in the context of this document, it has me very, very worried, I must say.
I didn't like all the general items that the public has, such as gum and Coke, and the last one you did.
This whole thing is terrifying. I'm just saying, you know? I don't like it. I don't like it one bit, is all I'm saying. But so there's some more stuff here. Like I said, I don't normally read this stuff because it's very dry, but I think for this particular case, the most effective thing is just to read what we can get from the CIA documents themselves. These tell the story better than anything I could possibly say. So here is something from CIA document 190684. It's talking about 2 19-year-old girls. These subjects have clearly demonstrated that they can pass from a fully awake state to a deep H-controlled state via the telephone, via some very subtle signal that cannot be detected by other persons in the room, and without the other individuals being able to note the change. It has been clearly shown that individuals can be induced into H by telephone, by receiving written matter, or by the use of code, signal, or words. Control of those hypnotized can be passed from one individual to another without great difficulty. It has also been shown by experimentation with these girls that they can act as unwilling couriers for information purposes, and that they can be conditioned to a point where they believe a change in identity on their part, even on the polygraph. So that quote remember the one I just read with all the points where they were asking, can we achieve these things?
This is saying we have.
Yeah, we think it's possible, but we're not sure. We need to do further research. That was a document from Project Bluebird from like 1950. So this is a quote from a much longer document saying, yeah, we just totally were able to figure out how to do some of this stuff. Now, again, this is not something I'm making up. This is from an actual CIA document, people. This is alarming stuff that I find hard to believe even from a document. It's bananas. Here's another document about electric shock that was used to cause amnesia. Redacted is reported to be an authority on electric shock. He is a psychiatrist of considerable note. Redacted explained that electric shock might be of considerable interest to the artichoke type of work. He stated that the standard electric shock machine, Reiter, whatever that is, could be used. He stated that using this machine with convulsive treatment, he could guarantee amnesia for certain periods of time, and particularly, he could guarantee amnesia for any knowledge of use of the convulsive shock. He stated that the lower setting of the machine produced a different type of shock. When this lower current type of shock was applied without convulsion, it had the effect of making a man talk. He said that this type of shock produced in the individual excruciating pain. He stated that there would be no question that the individual would be quite willing to give information if threatened with the use of this machine. It was Redacted's opinion that an individual could gradually be reduced through the use of electroshock treatment to the vegetable level. And I'll give you guys, we don't know for sure, this is, the name's redacted, but if you had to guess who was talking about this stuff, I don't know. We talked about somebody earlier who probably knew a lot about this. So that's all there's so many quotes from documents that you could find, and those are just my particular favorites, but those are all the ones I had ready for this episode. Agent Ether, did you have any other topics?
Here's the thing. I spent hours and hours researching this topic, and at some point I just had to stop because there's only so much time before we have to start our episode. So that was all I had for now, but that doesn't mean that's all there is.
Yeah, we've only just barely scratched the surface for this topic. I feel like we could easily do 10 episodes easily on just MKUltra, and then all of the stuff that it branches out and touches upon, you could do more, like biological warfare and stuff like that. There's a crazy amount of stuff going on. And like we said earlier, this stuff was highly compartmentalized and very, very secret. This stuff was given the highest level of secrecy. And personally, I believe there's a really good chance, given how long it went on through different administrations. I think it's very possible, even plausible, that it was not known about at the highest levels. Like the president did not know what was going on and probably was not briefed on any of this stuff. To me, that seems like the most likely scenario, because one president to the next is going to have a very different opinion on this sort of thing, but it didn't change what they were doing. They kept doing the same thing. Like the president didn't seem to have any input at all on this stuff. So I don't think he was ever briefed on any of this, in my opinion. But also, even though it was supposedly canceled in like 1973 or whatever, I don't think they would have ever stopped this stuff. They probably just moved it to a different, designation and just kept trucking right along, It
was just renamed, yeah.
Yeah, and it might not even be part of the CIA anymore.
Yeah.
It might be its own secret branch of the government.
And we're talking primarily about Project MKUltra, but there's a lot of other like branching projects, like Project Chatter. That was the one I mentioned earlier that was from 1947 to 53. Project MK and Naomi, which was like biological weapons. That was in the 50s through the 70s. Project MK Delta, MK Often, and, a lot more. MK Often, by the way, was supposedly delved into like the occult and like, maybe summoning demons or that kind of stuff. But there's not a whole lot of information on that one, unfortunately.
Baphomet.
Yeah. All right. Any final thoughts, Agents Ether or ETA?
I don't know, man. Like my final thought is there is some incredibly heinous stuff and incredibly unnecessary suffering that happened in result of a lot of these experiments. And this is one of those cases, man. It's just so effed up, I mean, it's so big too. And like we had talked about before, like there's so many different things that correlate and are involved with this case, and like so many things that were influenced by MKUltra. It's a boggle, man. It's a freaking boggle.
The whole episode.
It's crazy. It's so damn crazy, man. It's I don't know what to think about it besides like that. It's just a crazy damn event, and it's real. It's verifiable. It's
the thing
really
that
did happen.
This one just it really actually kind of makes me angry. And when I read about this stuff, I just think, man, this is not the America I want to live in. This is not my country.
Yeah.
This is not who we are, you know?
Yeah.
And most people, I think that most people are very upset when they learn about this kind of stuff. And that's why they had those congressional hearings and stuff. You know, we don't, as a whole, I don't think that whatever side, left, right, center, I don't think you're going to find too many people who are going to get behind this kind of thing. I think this is one of the things we can all unite behind politically, right? We don't want this kind of stuff going on in our country. We don't want to pay for it with our taxes. We don't want to support it with our votes. We don't want a part of it at all.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. If like say you're some like college dude or some young dumb idiot that wants to experiment with some LSD or some shit, yeah. I mean, I guess whatever, man. Like go fry some brain cells if you want. It's not. I don't think it's a good idea, but But besides that, like to have this kind of stuff like forced on people, like that, that's one of like the things that keeps on like sticking with me. It's so much of this suffering was just plain forced upon individuals that had no idea what the hell they were getting into, nor some of them didn't even have a choice, really. There's
some stuff I didn't really get into because honestly I just didn't want to. It's just too gruesome, just too shitty.
Yeah.
But they tortured men, women, and children all around the globe. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
And if anybody wants to look into some of these documents, I would say the best place, hands down, to go is, you've heard me talk about it before on this show, is the Black Vault. Just Google the Black Vault CIA or the Black Vault MKUltra, and you'll have a repository of probably the best repository of MKUltra documents anywhere on the website. The index for the documents alone is 85 pages, just to give you an idea of how much is available there. There's too much to even get. You're never going to get through all of it. It's just so much stuff. But if anybody wants to check out some of the stuff I'm talking about and verify for themselves, or hell, just submit a FOIA request yourself just to see it. I mean, this stuff is real. It's crazy, and I don't like it. And I'm going to have trouble sleeping tonight, probably. Good luck. Good luck, dear listener, sleeping tonight yourself after listening to this. All right. Well, I guess that's all we have for you this week. Thanks for listening. You can follow the show on Twitter at AlienConPod. We also have an email address, alienconpod@protonmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And don't forget to check out our Facebook group /page.